Now available in paperback and coming to Kindle Unlimited. John Haynes, Dark Succubus. The man who rules the world is tempted by a sultry succubus in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Dark Succubus in paperback or pre-order on Kindle Unlimited today. Last week, DC Comics announced it was shutting down the Vertigo imprint as a part of a reorganization of DC's publishing division. And I'm deeply saddened to see Vertigo Comics shut down in such an ignominious fashion, because Vertigo Comics was a significant brand to the comic book medium and opened up the comic book medium so that we could see different stories outside of the superhero genre from DC Comics. And with the shutting down of Vertigo Comics, I have to wonder, could John Haynes have saved the Vertigo imprint? And from what my readers have been telling me, John Haynes is basically a Vertigo comic without the Vertigo label. And they say it's everything they want in an old school Vertigo comic: a strong, masculine black male hero and a sexy black female assistant taking on supernatural forces in a strange and unusual world, a CEO who works at Morris Phillips, a corporate hell filled with vampires, demons, and monsters. A book that's been filled with supernatural action, adventure, and a little humor. And when I did John Haynes, I wanted to take a fresh 21st century look at the occult and horror stories similar to what Joss Whedon did with Buffy the Vampire Slayer and what Ivan Reitman and Harold Ramis did with Ghostbusters back in the 80s. And many of the people who picked up the first book in the John Haynes series, John Haynes, A Conversation with Death, say it reminds them a lot of Vertigo's John Constantine, Hellblazer, and that series was one of Vertigo's top-selling books, and John Constantine went on to become one of the flagship properties of the Vertigo brand. And right now, John Haynes, A Conversation with Death, is one of the top sellers on the SJS Direct imprint. And many of my readers tell me that John Haynes reminds them a lot of John Constantine and his long-running comic John Constantine Hellblazer. So for a lot of my readers, they are making a lot of comparisons to John Constantine with John Haynes, and they're saying that they're enjoying the stories the same way many Vertigo readers said they enjoyed John Constantine Hellblazer, a book that went on to go on for a 300-issue run during Karen Berger's tenure at Vertigo, and was DC's and Vertigo's one of their top properties, a property that was so valuable that it allowed DC and Warner Brothers to reap a bounty of profits from licensed merchandise like action figures, and allowed them to make a film adaptation starring Keanu Reeves and a TV adaptation that went one season on NBC. And now Constantine has been seen throughout the Arrowverse on episodes of Arrow, and recently just did a run on DC's Legends of Tomorrow. So the John Constantine character was one of the most popular characters on the Vertigo imprint, and if from the feedback I've been receiving on John Haynes, he could have become one of the breakout characters if he was a part of the Vertigo relaunch of 2018. So a lot of the old school Vertigo fans saw a lot of similarities between John Haynes and John Constantine, and I believe a lot of those old school Vertigo fans would have been eager to pick up the John Haynes series had it started over at Vertigo Comics in 2018. And I believe it would have been the book that could have saved the Vertigo imprint, because in publishing, it works like this. 90% of all books fail in the publishing marketplace, and the 10% of books are the ones that pay for the 90. And with your Andy Curry being a man with no vision, who didn't understand how publishing worked, he would have launched all of these books like Border Town, Hex Wives, High Level, and Goddess Mode, and they would have all failed. And I believe that the John Haynes book would have been the only one which would have done well, because it would have been what the old school Vertigo fans would have wanted, and it would have had the kind of story that they would have wanted. So I look at the John Haynes book as the book that could have possibly kept the lights on at Vertigo, because it would have done well enough to go out here and make people believe that there was some hope, or a light of hope, for the Vertigo imprint. And that's why I wonder, could John Haynes been the book that could have saved Vertigo Comics? Because this 25-page story, John Haynes, A Conversation with Death, again, is one of the top sellers on the SJS Direct imprint, and it was one of the best-selling books of 2018, and it continues to consistently sell right now in 2019, and it continues to sell as I launched the second book in the John Haynes series, John Haynes' Dark Succubus, because many of the people who are picking up Dark Succubus are now going back to pick up John Haynes' A Conversation with Death, and some of them are even going back further to pick up The Man Who Rules the World, The Temptation of John Haynes, and John Haynes' appearance in the ISIS series, such as ISIS Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, ISIS Night of the Vampires, ISIS Bride of Dracula, and ISIS Escape from Transylvania. So it is not only selling the new books like Dark Succubus and John Haynes' A Conversation with Death, it is also selling older titles as well. And that's what a good comic is supposed to do. It's not only supposed to sell the current book, it's also supposed to sell the back catalog, and it's supposed to get people anticipating picking up the next book in the series, which is John Haynes' The Man with Nothing to Lose. So that's why I sit here and wonder, could John Haynes have been the book to save the Vertigo imprint? Because, again, many of my readers have been telling me that the book reminds them of a Vertigo comic, and it reminds them of everything they love about Vertigo comics. And with the word of mouth the book is getting on the print-on-demand track at Amazon in paperback, and with Kindle, the book is showing that it has starting to get a following, and it's starting to get a following with just me marketing it on a shoestring budget on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And I believe if Vertigo had picked up John Haynes and had the distribution of Diamond and the advertising and support of DC Comics, I believe the John Haynes series would have probably gotten 25,000 orders on the first run, and I believe it would have been picked up for a second printing, and I believe the book would have done 50,000 in sales, because if people are responding positively on a print-on-demand run, then and it's leading to strong sales, I believe it would have gotten stronger sales with if it had been presented to the comic book marketplace, because everybody who has read John Haynes' A Conversation with Death has loved that simple 25, 26-page story, and they were willing to spend $6.99 for the paperback, and they were willing to tell their friends to spend $6.99 for the paperback. So that's telling me that when it comes down to the John Haynes character, the character is starting to get a following. He has a solid foundation, and I believe that foundation could have built some strong momentum for the Vertigo imprint, and it could have presented a positive picture for the Vertigo imprint, which was suffering through some really bad leadership as related to the Vertigo imprint. Because when the Vertigo imprint, as I see it right now, when your Andy Curry was running it, he had turned it into a platform for what people call social justice warriors. And unfortunately, many of these social justice warriors didn't understand anything about professionalism, and they went on social media going out here and attacking people like Ethan Van Sciver, like with your Robbie Reyes, who was taking a picture of his anus to send to him. And then you had several others going on Trump rants, and that really tarnished the brand, especially the sex scandal involving your Eric Esquivel, the writer of Border Town, who was alleged to have been participating in an inappropriate relationship with a minor. So all of those scandals, they tarnished the Vertigo imprint, and Vertigo really needed a professional like myself who knew how to market online and was focused on sales and not generating controversy, because controversy does not sell comics. What sells comics is having a strong character and a strong story, and making sure that the story, and the art are rock solid on the page. Those are the standards that Karen Berger established when she was put in charge of the Vertigo imprint, and those are the standards that I establish for every SJS Direct book. And if I were working at Vertigo on a John Haynes series, I would be more focused on trying to sell books to readers and not trying to generate controversy, because on my blogs, Shawn James Black Freelance Writer, and my YouTube channel and my social media, my main focus is selling books to readers. And I have been writing books for over 25 years, and I have been publishing them for over a decade. So I know what sells in not only the trade publishing market, but I also know what sells in the comic book marketplace. And what you want to do in both marketplaces is form a relationship with the customer. And I've been doing that on social media for the last couple of years. So when I'm on social media, I am not out here going on a Donald Trump rant. I am trying to market and sell books. And I even go as far as making my own ads and placing them on YouTube so that my readers can know that my books are available. And I even do things like live streams where I'm reading from my own books, and I've started doing that recently. I've done sample chapters in the past, but I did a live stream where I actually read from one of my books so that my readers could experience the story from me. And they actually asked me to go out here and read books to them, and some of them want me to read a John Haynes book to them. So I'm always out here trying to give my customers the very best in terms of customer service, and always trying to go out here and give my customers the best reading experience, and trying to maintain a great relationship with my customers. And that was one of the things that I saw that was missing from the failed 2018 relaunch of Vertigo Comics, a relaunch where it was all about Andy Curry's mismanagement of the brand, and these so-called SJW Comics pros doing everything to generate controversy and to get attention for themselves, but not trying to get attention for their products. Because the only way you get attention for your products is to make sure that what is on the page is rock solid. And if what's on the page is not rock solid, then you're not going to get readers. Because with all of the Vertigo relaunch books, yes, they got a lot of orders on the first issue, but when people saw how terrible these books were and how they were poorly written and nothing more than propaganda for identity politics, they had no incentive to go out here and pick up the second issue. Now, when I was doing John Haynes, A Conversation with Death, I sat there and I said to myself, if I want to do this series, I have to make the first book incredibly solid. I need to make it the very best it can be, and I need to really make a strong first impression on readers, with everything from the cover, which was a masterpiece cover done by Mike Williams, all the way to the interior content, which needed to be some of the best writing I ever did in my career. So I needed to make sure that the 25 pages of A Conversation with Death were extremely compelling in order to sell the next book in the John Haynes series, Dark Succubus, in 2019. And because I did such a solid job on A Conversation with Death, from what readers have been telling me, they have been coming back for Dark Succubus, and others have been coming back for the other books that John has appeared in, such as the first book he appeared in, The Temptation of John Haynes, The Man Who Rules the World, Isis, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, Isis, Night of the Vampires, Isis, Bride of Dracula, and Isis, Escape from Transylvania. And even some come back for Easting the Sands of Time to see the teenage John Haynes in action. So when I look at the John Haynes character, again, I have to wonder, could he have been the character to save Vertigo Comics? Because if a character like John Haynes can sell for a small, independent, print-on-demand publisher like myself, then that character could have been an icon over at Vertigo Comics, and he could have been a hit at Vertigo Comics. Unfortunately, because the comic book industry is filled with a lot of so-called far leftists and a lot of people with no vision and no direction, this is why great characters like John Haynes can't reach the marketplace, and why comic readers can't access those characters, because there is a problem with the people running companies like DC Comics. Because I look at many of the policies at DC Comics from your weak leaders like your Andy Curry and many others who are running DC and Warner Brothers, and they are keeping, again, great characters like John Haynes from their marketplaces. Now, one of the things that I saw that was not only troubling, in addition to the complete failure over at DC Comics as related to the Vertigo imprint, was the new policy they put in place a couple of years ago, where they didn't want to pay creators for their property. Now, Karen Berger originally created a contract where creators could own their property, but Warner Brothers executives, on seeing characters like your V for Vendetta and many other characters get film adaptations, decided to try to change the contracts, and that really de-incentivized many creators like your Warren Ellis and many others who created a lot of Vertigo characters and properties to leave DC Comics and Vertigo because they felt like they weren't getting fair compensation. And the days, and what many at Vertigo and DC Comics need to understand is that that's what Karen Berger understood, is that the days of work for hire are over, and that if you want to get great intellectual properties, you're going to have to offer fair and just compensation, because no one is going to spend, like I did, 2 decades creating a character like John Haynes to just sell him for a low price and get lowballed, and a work for hire deal where we get no sort of profit sharing in terms of licensing, no profit sharing in terms of merchandising, no profit sharing in terms of any sort of film or TV rights. And that's what that Warner Brothers executive did when he went out here and decided to change the contracts. What he did was say, oh, he wants to cut people out of the deal. And when you cut people out of the deal, they have no incentive to create for you. So this is something that's keeping a lot of great creators from wanting to even think about coming over to a imprint like Vertigo. And that's what really, I believe, wound up being the complete demise of Vertigo, in addition to the completely incompetent leadership of your Andy Curry. So when I look at your Vertigo, I look at it from a business perspective, and I say to myself, why would you get rid of a contract that was actually bringing you money? Because the money that would be spent on making sure that these creators are fairly compensated was a short-term loss for a long-term gain. Because if you went out here and had to pay for the separate rights for film and television, it would be small potatoes compared to the large profits you would gain, because these properties already have a following. And yes, they are creator-owned properties, but the money you would pay the creators is small in comparison to the $100 million or $200 million openings you would receive. So that's where I saw where Warner Brothers' greed undermined the Vertigo imprint, and it undermined their ability to go out here and get innovative concepts and innovative approaches to storytelling. And that was what made Vertigo an asset to DC Comics, because it was a place where people who wanted to create comics could go and create comics that weren't superheroes, and they could explore different types of stories like mystery stories, science fiction stories, fantasy stories, and supernatural stories without having to deal with the comics code or deal with a DC bullet on the comic, stigmatizing it as a sort of superhero comic. Because what's going to happen right now to DC Comics, which is talking about DC Black Label, is that people are going to see that DC bullet on that Black Label book, and they're going to start thinking that it's a kiddie comic, and they're going to walk away from that DC Black Label book. And when they see books like your Batman Damned or your Superman origin story once again, they're going to say, hey, this is a kiddie label, and they're not going to want anything to do with it. And what the Vertigo label meant to DC Comics was a place where older readers could go and pick up more mature content, more sophisticated content, more complex content, and it was a symbol to people that this was a place where they could indulge in the comic book medium without having to deal with the stigma of superheroes or having to deal with the idea that comics were something for children. So when I look at what has happened to Vertigo, it's a sad day for comics, and it's a sad day for the comic book medium, because that means that we aren't going to get very sophisticated high-end comics from DC Comics anymore. And again, I just have to wonder, could John Haynes have saved the Vertigo imprint? Because when, again, my readers tell me that when they read John Haynes' A Conversation with Death, it reminded them so much of Vertigo's old school stories that I believe it would have been the kind of book they would have picked up, and it would have been the kind of book they would have enjoyed, and I would have loved to have gone out here and given that type of story to Vertigo's readers, and I would have loved to have shared that story to Vertigo's readers, and I would have loved to have had someone like Mike Williams working with me on that comic, and I believe it would have been a big hit, because if it's a big hit with me on the SJS Direct imprint, I have to wonder, could it have been an even bigger hit on the DC Vertigo imprint? If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to try John Haynes' A Conversation with Death, John Haynes' Dark Succubus, The Temptation of John Haynes, The Man Who Rules the World, or Isis, Bride of Dracula, Isis, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, Isis, Night of the Vampires, or Isis, Escape from Transylvania, and E-Steam, The Sands of Time, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. There you can pick up all those titles in paperback and Kindle formats, and you can pick up all my other SJS Direct imprint books on Amazon as well. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.